A millionaire CEO rejects all the rich women, but falls in love with a poor food delivery girl. Before we start the story, tell us in the comments. Where are you watching from? Enjoy the story. Richard Stone was bored, even though he was at the most exclusive party in town, surrounded by wealthy, admiring women. He tried to hide his impatience as he listened to empty conversations about luxury trips and rare jewelry. He was about to come up with an excuse to leave when something unexpected happened. From across the room, an outraged scream cut through the air. What the hell? All eyes turned toward the entrance. A distinguished man in a spotless white suit, one of the most powerful bankers in the city, was now completely drenched in red juice. And right in front of him stood a simple young woman holding a delivery bag from Oriental Flavor Restaurant, her eyes wide open as if she had just accidentally set off an explosion. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't see you there." She stammered, panicked, trying to wipe his shirt with a napkin. The whole room burst into laughter. Who let someone like that in here? She's probably never even seen a suit up close. What a disaster. Layla felt her face burn with embarrassment. "I was just delivering an order. The app sent me to the wrong address." The banker, still trying to save his shirt, huffed in anger. "Get this girl out of here now." Before Layla could react, a security guard appeared and grabbed her arm. "You don't belong here," he said coldly. She tried to pull away, but he was too strong. "Wait, I was just making a delivery. I'm not trespassing." That's when Richard stepped in. "Let her go." The guard froze. The guests exchanged shocked glances. The banker frowned. "Richard, don't tell me you're defending this girl?" But Richard completely ignored the man's outrage and walked up to Layla, crossing his arms. "What's your name?" he asked. "And why are you here?" Layla swallowed hard, still unable to believe that the richest man in the city was speaking to her. "I'm Layla," she said hesitantly. "I work at Oriental Flavor Restaurant and do deliveries, but the app sent me to the wrong place." Richard narrowed his eyes. "Wait, is that the restaurant that delivers yakisoba?" Layla blinked, confused. "Yes. How do you know?" That's when Richard smiled for the first time that night. "So you're the one who makes that amazing yakisoba?" Layla scratched the back of her head. "Well, it's my grandmother's secret recipe. I just help prepare it." Richard rubbed his chin, thinking. "That's perfect." "I need a cook." Layla froze. "What?" The guests gasped in unison. The banker's eyes widened. "Richard, you can't be serious." But Richard didn't care at all. "I'll pay you 3 times what you make as a delivery driver." Layla almost choked on her own breath. 3 times more? Yes. She was still in shock. That was a lot of money. But she couldn't just leave her grandmother alone at the restaurant. Layla thought quickly. If she was going to do this, it had to be worth it. So, crossing her arms, she blurted out without thinking, 5 times more. The guests widened their eyes. The banker, still trying to save his shirt, nearly had a heart attack. Richard raised an eyebrow, surprised. "You're pretty demanding." "I have bills to pay?" He smiled, amused. 4 times? 4.5. Richard narrowed his eyes. "Do you always negotiate like this?" "Only when I'm in trouble." The entire room was in complete shock. The banker huffed in frustration. "Richard, are you really hiring this girl?" But Richard just kept looking at Layla. Then he smirked. "Deal." Layla's eyes widened. "What?" "You start tomorrow." "But wait." The room erupted in whispers and laughter. Layla looked at Richard, then at her stained apron, then at the wealthy people around her. What just happened? She had only come to make a delivery. And now? She had a new job. And the worst part? She was working for a completely unpredictable billionaire CEO. What could possibly go wrong? The next morning, Layla woke up still unable to believe what had happened the night before. She blinked a few times, trying to gather her thoughts. Did I really agree to work for a billionaire CEO? Her grandmother's voice came from the other side of the door. "Layla, dear, breakfast is ready." Layla took a deep breath, got up, and stepped out of her room. In the small kitchen of the Oriental Flavor Restaurant, her grandmother was already finishing up frying the spring rolls for the first deliveries of the day. "So, how was that big party?" the older woman asked, not even turning around to look at her. Layla grabbed a cup of coffee and sat down at the table. "Oh, it was great. I caused a little disaster, spilled juice all over a banker, almost got kicked out, and, well, now I work for Richard Stone." Her grandmother froze mid-motion, holding the spatula in the air. What? I know, it sounds crazy. But he offered me 5 times what I make here, and, well, I accepted, but only part-time. Her grandmother went back to stirring the spring rolls in the pan, deep in thought. And do you trust this man? Layla shrugged. He eats our yakisoba every week. If he were dangerous, he would have tried to kidnap me by now. The older woman chuckled and shook her head. Well then, go ahead. But if he gives you trouble, let me know, and I'll handle him. Layla quickly finished her coffee and stood up. Wish me luck that I don't break anything on my first day. The Stone Enterprises building was even more intimidating up close. As she stepped inside, Layla felt the blast of cold air from the AC and saw dozens of employees in suits and high heels rushing around, talking on the phone or typing on expensive tablets. She adjusted her apron, feeling completely out of place. A well-dressed receptionist looked at her with a neutral expression. Can I help you? I'm Layla, Richard's new cook. The woman blinked slowly, as if trying to figure out whether this was some kind of joke. After a brief, uncomfortable silence, she picked up the phone and dialed quickly. Mr. Stone, your new cook is here. Layla heard a muffled response on the other end, and the receptionist pointed toward the elevator. Top floor. Layla took a deep breath and stepped inside, her stomach twisting with nerves. When the doors opened, she found something completely different from what she had expected. Richard's private kitchen wasn't just a kitchen. It was a masterpiece, with marble countertops, glass shelves, and a huge island in the center. And of course, Richard was there, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed, waiting for her. Took you long enough. I got lost 3 times on the way, but I made it. He chuckled and gestured toward the ingredients on the counter. Good. Let's see if you actually know how to cook. You didn't test that before hiring me? No, that sounds like a bad business decision. It might be, but if it's terrible, I'll just fire you and move on. Layla narrowed her eyes. Was that a challenge? You can take it that way. She rolled up her sleeves. All right, let's see who loses here. Layla grabbed the ingredients and started cooking a simple yakisoba, just the way her grandmother had taught her. She could feel Richard watching her the entire time, which made her a little nervous. You're staring too much, she muttered as she stirred the vegetables. I'm studying the process. I can't tell if I'm a cook or an animal at the zoo. He smirked. Just making sure my food will be edible. Layla rolled her eyes and focused, but soon a problem came up. She had been so caught up in the conversation that she added way too much soy sauce. The salty smell filled the air and she felt a wave of panic. Oh no? What? Nothing. She quickly tried to fix it, but the damage was already done. Richard grabbed a plate, served himself a portion, and picked up a pair of chopsticks. He took a bite, chewed slowly, and then frowned. Layla held her breath. Well? Richard looked at her and paused dramatically. Have you ever been to the ocean? Yes, why? Because this has about the same amount of salt. Layla groaned. Great, first day, and I already ruined everything. Richard set the chopsticks down. It's a rookie mistake. But honestly, it's still better than a lot of things I've eaten. Layla crossed her arms. So that means I passed the test? He laughed. Yes, but with one condition. Don't poison me. No promises. A short time later, as Layla was cleaning the counter, someone walked into the kitchen without knocking. A man in a suit with a stern expression. Mr. Stone, can we talk? Richard sighed. Layla, finish up here and meet me in my office. She nodded and watched the two leave. Alone in the kitchen, Layla started wondering what had just happened. In less than 24 hours, she had gone from a normal life to working at Stone Enterprises, cooking for a wealthy and arrogant businessman, and negotiating her salary like a seasoned professional. And now, she had the feeling this was just the beginning. Layla finished cleaning the kitchen and looked around. The place was spotless, and she felt a small sense of pride. If someone had told her that within a day she would be cooking in a billionaire's office, she would have laughed. But now she was here. She dried her hands on her apron and walked down the long hallway toward Richard's office. When she arrived, she stopped in front of the slightly open door. Inside, Richard was leaning against his desk, arms crossed, while the man in the suit spoke in a serious tone. This is not the right time for distractions, Richard. You need to stay focused on the merger with Sterling Group. You can't afford to waste time hiring street cooks. Layla narrowed her eyes. Street cook? She pushed the door open and stepped inside without hesitation. If I'm a street cook, then you're just an office executive. It's the same thing. The man turned to her, surprised by the interruption. And you are? Your boss's personal chef. Richard hid a smile and turned toward her. Layla, this is Paul, my financial advisor. Layla looked him up and down. Paul, huh? Nice. Now you can stop calling me a street cook. Paul scoffed and turned back to Richard. Are you really taking this seriously? Richard shrugged. Her food is better than any five-star restaurant around here. Layla lifted her chin. Paul crossed his arms. Fine. Then why don't you introduce this chef to your business partners? Let's see if she's really as good as you claim. Layla blinked. What? Richard looked at her, considering the idea. You know, that's not a bad suggestion. Layla's eyes widened. Wait, what? Paul smiled, satisfied. Tomorrow night, Richard has a business dinner. Why don't you cook for the investors? If you're as good as he says, everyone will be impressed. If not, I still get paid either way, Layla interrupted, without missing a beat. Richard laughed. She's got a point. Paul narrowed his eyes. Then it's settled. Layla crossed her arms. And do I get to choose the menu? Paul hesitated. Well, usually, these dinners have more sophisticated dishes, but I was hired because my food is good, not because I follow rules. Richard looked at Paul. I like that. Paul sighed. Just don't make anyone sick. No promises. Layla replied with a smile. The next morning, Layla arrived early at the Stone Enterprises building, carrying a basket full of ingredients. Richard found her in the kitchen and glanced at the bags. How many people are you planning to feed? 6 investors. And you. So, technically 7. But it's always good to have extra food. Richard grabbed an apple from the basket and took a bite. So, what's on the menu? Layla leaned on the counter. I thought of something simple but memorable. That sounds like you. We'll start with shrimp fritters, then special fried rice, sweet and sour beef, and yakisoba. Richard raised an eyebrow. You're serving yakisoba to millionaires? Layla lifted her chin. They're going to love it. Richard chuckled and took another bite of the apple. You're stubborn. And I'm good at what I do. Night fell, bringing the business dinner with it. Layla was in the kitchen, focused on preparing the dishes, when she heard the first guests arriving. She peeked through the glass and saw elegantly dressed men and women speaking in hushed tones. Paul was among them, and when he glanced toward the kitchen, he gave a smug little smile. Layla rolled her eyes. Richard appeared beside her. Nervous? Me? Layla raised an eyebrow. Never, he laughed. We'll see. The dinner began, and the dishes started making their way out. First, the golden, crispy shrimp fritters. Then, the fried rice with fresh vegetables and herbs. The sweet and sour beef arrived, fragrant and glistening. And finally, the steaming yakisoba, with handmade noodles and perfectly sautéed vegetables. At first, the guests tasted the food with neutral expressions. Layla watched discreetly, her heart pounding. Then the magic happened. The first smiles appeared. Glances were exchanged. Someone cleared their throat and looked at Richard. This is surprising. Another investor nodded. I've never had yakisoba this good. Paul looked like he had swallowed a lemon. Richard glanced at Layla from across the room and smiled. I told you. Layla blinked, surprised. She hadn't just impressed those people. She had won. And for the first time, she realized that this new job might be more interesting than she had imagined. The success of the business dinner was still on Layla's mind when she arrived for another day at Stone Enterprises. The investors' feedback had been a mix of surprise and delight. She had proven that even simple food could win over anyone. The problem was that now the company's employees seemed to have noticed her too. As she entered the building, she felt several eyes on her. Whispers filled the hallways. So this is the mysterious cook. How did someone like her get in here? I heard Mr. Stone is interested in her. Layla widened her eyes. Interested? What a ridiculous idea. She quickened her pace, gripping the handle of the shopping bag tightly. She needed to focus on her work, not on gossip. But as soon as she stepped into Richard's private kitchen, something caught her attention. The countertops were covered with takeout boxes from high-end restaurants. Elegant, delicately plated dishes were spread across the table, but Richard, standing by the counter, held a fork and looked at the food as if he were being forced to eat sand. Layla set down her bag and crossed her arms. What's going on here? Richard sighed and put the fork down. Paul insisted I try food from some of the best chefs in town to refine my palate. Layla picked up one of the box lids and read the restaurant's name, LeBlanc. Oh yes, the place that charges $500 for a tiny dish that looks like table decor. She glanced at the plates and frowned. This doesn't look like food. It looks like modern art. Richard chuckled. Finally, someone who agrees with me. She picked up a fork and stabbed a piece of meat delicately decorated with a gold leaf. She tasted it and made a face. This tastes like seasoned cardboard. Richard let out a laugh. Exactly. Layla looked at him, then at the luxurious food boxes, narrowing her eyes. You already had good food here, and you let all of this go to waste just to try gourmet dishes? Blame Paul. He wants me to refine my taste. Layla rolled her eyes and started unpacking the bag she had brought. Well, if it's refined taste he wants, I'll show him what real food is. Richard watched as she began preparing a plate of fried rice with chicken and a special sauce. You're cooking just to prove a point, aren't you? She smiled. Always. Soon, the smell of fresh food filled the kitchen. Richard, still seated at the counter, watched closely as Layla finished the dish. When she placed the bowl in front of him, he didn't hesitate. He picked up the chopsticks and took the first bite. His eyes closed for a moment, and he sighed. This is good. Layla crossed her arms, satisfied. Better than the expensive dishes? Richard smiled playfully. No comparison. But before Layla could respond, the kitchen door opened, and a blonde woman in a tailored suit walked in as if she owned the place. Richard, darling, I've been looking for you. She stopped when she noticed Layla and raised an eyebrow. Who is this? Richard took another bite of his fried rice without even looking at the woman. Layla. My personal chef. The blonde woman laughed dramatically. A chef? What do you mean? You've never needed a chef. Layla noticed the way the woman looked at her. That typical glance of someone assessing whether she belonged there. Well, now he does, Layla replied with a sly smile. The blonde seemed surprised by her boldness. Richard sighed and pushed his plate aside. Layla, this is Miranda. She's your ex-girlfriend? Layla guessed. Miranda laughed again. Oh dear. I'm still very much a part of Richard's life. Layla narrowed her eyes. Lucky you. Richard just rubbed his temple, clearly tired. Miranda, what do you want? She smiled and placed a hand on his shoulder. Dinner. Tonight, at LeBlanc. Just like old times. Layla bit her lip to keep from laughing. Richard sighed. I have a meeting. Then tomorrow. He looked at Layla, then at Miranda, and sighed again. I have my own chef now. I don't need to go out to eat. Miranda's smile faded for a moment, but she quickly recovered. Well, I hope your new chef is very talented, because I doubt anything can top dinner at LeBlanc. Layla leaned on the counter. If you'd like, I can prepare something special for you. Miranda looked her up and down. Oh dear, I doubt you're capable of that. Layla smiled sweetly. There's only one way to find out. Richard held back a smile as Miranda gave him a sharp look. See you later, Richard. And with that, she walked out of the kitchen, leaving behind a strong scent of expensive perfume. Layla turned to Richard. Has she always been like this? Worse. Then good luck. Richard chuckled and went back to his meal. Thanks, I'll need it. Layla took a sip of juice and leaned against the counter, watching Richard as he finished eating. She still didn't quite understand him. He was a billionaire, surrounded by opportunistic people, living in a world completely different from hers. But somehow, he seemed normal. And that was a problem. Because the more normal he seemed, the more Layla felt she needed to keep her guard up. It was better not to get attached. This was just a job. Or at least, that's what she kept telling herself. The next day, Layla arrived at Richard's office feeling strangely at ease. In just a few days, she had already adapted to the peculiar routine of cooking for an eccentric billionaire and dealing with the wary looks of the staff. But what she didn't expect was to find Richard and Paul in the middle of a heated discussion so early in the morning. This is ridiculous, Richard, Paul exclaimed, slamming his hand on the desk. Sounds like a great challenge to me, Richard replied with a half-smile, crossing his arms. Layla stopped at the doorway, holding a bag of fresh ingredients. Am I interrupting something important? Paul sighed and ran a hand over his face, clearly frustrated. Tell him yourself that this idea is ridiculous. Layla frowned and looked at Richard. What is it now? Richard pointed to an open newspaper on the desk. The headline highlighted a charity food event featuring some of the city's top chefs. Paul thinks I'm not capable of winning this cooking competition. Layla blinked in disbelief. You want to participate? Richard gave a small smile. Why not? Paul rolled his eyes. Because you're a CEO, not a chef. Layla crossed her arms and narrowed her eyes. Richard, can you at least cook an egg? He tilted his head. I made instant noodles once. Paul threw his hands up in exasperation. See, he doesn't stand a chance. Layla bit her lip to keep from laughing. Well, then I suggest he gets a good teacher. Richard looked at her. Are you offering to teach me? She shrugged. If you promise not to burn down the kitchen. The next few days were pure chaos. Layla quickly discovered that Richard Stone, the man responsible for billions of dollars in investments, was completely hopeless in the kitchen. On his first attempt at cooking a steak, he nearly set the pan on fire. Why is there so much smoke? He coughed, waving a hand in the air. Because you turned the heat up too high. Layla exclaimed, grabbing the pan from him. On his second attempt, he tried chopping onions and ended up cutting his own finger. Ouch! My God, you're a danger to yourself. For the third lesson, Layla decided to teach him something simple. A sandwich. But somehow even that went wrong. You can't put half a jar of mayonnaise, Richard. But I like mayonnaise. Paul, who occasionally checked in on their progress, always left shaking his head. This is going to be a total disaster. Layla, however, was determined. He might be a disaster now, but he'll get better. Richard raised an eyebrow. You have that much faith in me? She smirked. No, but I like a challenge. Finally, the day of the event arrived. The hall was filled with renowned chefs and influential business people. The press covered every detail, and the judges were eager to taste the competitors' dishes. Richard wore a spotless apron and, despite his lack of experience, seemed surprisingly confident. Layla stayed behind the scenes, watching with a mix of apprehension and pride. Then the competition began. The participants had 1 hour to prepare an original dish. Richard grabbed his ingredients with determination and started cooking. Layla held her breath. Was he still a disaster? Yes, but over the past few days he had improved. She watched as he chopped the vegetables, still slow but without injuring himself. She saw him prepare the sauce, focused and without wasting ingredients. And she saw when he plated the dish with precision, without overdoing the mayonnaise. When time was up, the dishes were presented to the judges. Layla bit her lip. The judges tasted each one, murmuring among themselves. Then they reached Richard's dish. A silence filled the room as one of the judges picked up a fork and took a bite. The second judge did the same, and the third. Layla held her breath. Then, one of the judges wiped his mouth and looked at Richard. Mr. Stone, I have to admit, the suspense in the room was almost unbearable. This is surprisingly delicious. Layla let out a breath of relief. Paul, watching from a distance, widened his eyes. But how? The second judge nodded. The balance of flavors, the texture, truly impressive. Richard gave a slight smile and glanced at Layla, who simply gave him a thumbs up. When the final results were announced, Richard didn't win. But he came in second place. And for a CEO who had never cooked before, that was more than a victory. When the event was over, Richard approached Layla with a satisfied smile. So, teacher, did I do a good job? She smiled. I'd say you passed with flying colors. He stepped closer. There's something I've been meaning to ask. Layla crossed her arms. What is it? Richard tilted his head, thoughtful. How about we open a restaurant together? Layla blinked, surprised. What? He smiled. I'm serious. Your food is amazing. And honestly, I'm starting to enjoy this. Layla looked at him, trying to figure out if he was joking. But from the gleam in Richard's eyes, she realized he wasn't. And for the first time, she started to wonder. Maybe this wasn't just the end of a challenge. Maybe it was the beginning of something much bigger. After the cooking event, Layla thought her life would go back to normal. But ever since Richard had suggested opening a restaurant together, her mind wouldn't stop racing. Huh? A business partner with a billionaire? It sounded like a joke. But when she arrived at the office that morning, she realized Richard wasn't joking. Right in the middle of the massive conference table was a stack of documents. Good morning, cooking teacher, Richard greeted with a sly smile. Layla looked at the papers and narrowed her eyes. What's this? Richard crossed his arms. Potential locations for the restaurant. Layla blinked. Wait, you actually want to open a restaurant with me? He pulled out a chair and sat down, tapping the papers lightly. Not only do I want to, but I've already started looking for the best places. She let out a nervous laugh. Richard, this is crazy. I'm just a cook who learned to make good food from my grandmother. He shrugged. And I'm just a billionaire who never cooked in his life and nearly set the kitchen on fire trying to fry a steak. Sounds like a good balance. Layla shook her head in disbelief. You really have no idea what you're doing, do you? Richard smiled. I just know that every great investment starts with a good plan. And I have one. She sighed and pulled up a chair sitting next to him. Okay, suppose I agree to this crazy idea. Where do you plan to open this restaurant? Richard opened one of the documents and pointed it to the locations. I have 3 options. One downtown, another in an upscale neighborhood, and a third near your village. Layla froze. Near my village? Richard nodded. I thought it would be a great way to support your community. And honestly, homemade food has a strong appeal. She looked at him suspiciously. Was this your idea or Paul's? Richard laughed. Mine. Paul thinks it's a mistake to invest outside the commercial center. But I disagree. Layla bit her lip, thinking, Is this serious? 100%. She was quiet for a moment, trying to organize her thoughts. It would be an incredible opportunity, but also a huge risk. Richard noticed her hesitation and leaned his elbows on the table. What's holding you back? Layla sighed. My grandmother. I don't want to leave her alone in the restaurant. Richard tilted his head. Then bring her to the new restaurant. Layla's eyes widened. You make it sound so simple. Isn't it? She's a great cook, you are too. It would be a family business. Layla was speechless. Richard smiled. Come on, Layla. What do you have to lose? She took a deep breath. Fine, but I want half the decision-making power over the restaurant. Deal. And no outrageous prices. I wanted it to be affordable for everyone. Richard raised an eyebrow. You really know how to negotiate. Layla smiled. I learned from you. The first thing Layla did after leaving the office was rush home to tell her grandmother. When she arrived at the small kitchen of Sabor Oriental, she found the old woman calmly folding aprons. Grandma, you won't believe this. The woman looked up and smiled. What is it, Layla? She pulled up a chair and sat down. Richard wants to open a restaurant with me. With me? Her grandmother blinked a few times, surprised. The billionaire you work for? Layla nodded excitedly. Yes, and he wants to open it near the village. The old woman smiled softly and kept folding the aprons. And do you want this? Layla was silent for a moment. I think so. But only if you come with me. Her grandmother chuckled. My dear, I'm too old to start a new restaurant. But I need you. This restaurant only exists because of you. Her grandmother took her hands. I'll always be here for you, Layla. But it's time for you to build your own story. Layla felt a tightness in her chest. Her grandmother was right. And for the first time, she realized that maybe she was ready. In the following days, Richard and Layla started working on the restaurant project. The discussions were intense. I want affordable dishes. Layla insisted, but without compromising quality, Richard countered. They were debating everything from the restaurant's name to the menu. How about taste of home? Richard suggested. Layla frowned. Kind of generic. And what do you suggest? She thought for a moment and then smiled. Flavors of the village. Richard thought it over and nodded. I like that. Slowly, everything started to take shape, but there was one detail no one expected. The night before signing the restaurant contract, Layla got an unexpected visit. Miranda. She showed up at the door of Sabor Oriental with a sly smile. We need to talk. Layla crossed her arms. I don't have anything to say to you. Miranda walked in without being invited and looked around with disdain. So this is where you worked. Makes sense, Layla sighed. What do you want, Miranda? The blonde smiled and walked closer. I just want to warn you to be careful. Layla raised an eyebrow. Careful with what? Miranda fixed her hair and sighed dramatically. You might think Richard is being generous, but men like him don't do anything without a hidden agenda. Layla clenched her fists. What are you implying? Miranda shrugged. I'm just saying that when he gets tired of this little game, he'll throw you away. Layla felt her blood boil. Funny, because it seems like he got tired of you first. Miranda turned red. We'll see how long you last, sweetheart, and with that, she left. Layla felt a tightness in her chest, She didn't want to believe anything Miranda said. But what if it was true? She couldn't fool herself. Richard was a billionaire. She was just a simple cook. What if all of this was just a passing fancy for him? The next day, Layla walked into Richard's office, determined to speak up. But before she could say a word, he was already signing the restaurant papers. Done. We're officially partners now. Layla swallowed hard. There was no turning back. Now, it would either work out perfectly, or it would go terribly wrong. After signing the contract, Layla found herself officially a partner with a billionaire. And, as absurd as it seemed, she had a restaurant to open. But that didn't mean it would be easy. On the contrary, Richard, with all his business experience, wanted everything to be perfect. "We need a strong visual identity," he said, as he looked at logo options on his computer screen. Layla, sitting across from him, rested her face in her hands. "Richard, something that conveys sophistication but still feels welcoming. Something modern, but with a rustic touch." Layla sighed. "Richard." He finally looked up. "What?" She crossed her arms. "This is a restaurant, not a tech company." Richard tilted his head. "But branding is important." Layla rolled her eyes. "More important than the food?" He gave a sideways smile. Okay, let's focus on the food." Layla took a deep breath. "Thank you." But she barely had time to relax before Paul walked into the room with a stack of papers. "We've got a problem." Layla closed her eyes for a second. "Of course we do." Richard took the papers. "What's happened now?" Paul sighed. "The property we picked for the restaurant needs urgent repairs, more than we expected." Layla widened her eyes. "What?" Paul nodded. "Electrical issues, leaks, and, well, let's just say there was a pigeon's nest inside the kitchen." Layla put her hands on her head. "This can't be happening." Richard flipped through the papers thinking, "We can fix this. It'll delay things a bit, but it's nothing impossible." Paul crossed his arms. "Only it's going to be expensive." Layla widened her eyes. "How expensive?" Paul hesitated. Richard, on the other hand, seemed indifferent. "Don't worry about it." Layla slammed her hand on the table. "Don't worry?" "Richard, this isn't just your money. I'm your partner. I need to know." He stared at her for a few seconds. Then he grabbed a pen and scribbled a number on a piece of paper. Layla took the paper, looked at the number, and almost fell off her chair. "Are you out of your mind?" Richard shrugged. "It's a necessary investment." Layla slapped her forehead. "A necessary investment? Richard, with that money I could buy half the town." Paul, who seemed to be enjoying the scene, just watched. Layla took a deep breath. "What if we found another place?" Richard shook his head. "This is the right place, but," he crossed his arms. "Do you trust me?" Layla froze. He asked it so seriously. She sighed. "Fine, but if this restaurant goes bankrupt, I'll haunt you forever." Richard laughed. "Fair enough." In the following days, the restaurant became a construction site. Layla spent her days overseeing every detail. And Richard, well, he tried to help. "Richard, no, that paint is for the walls, not the counter." "Are you sure? I think it would give it a modern touch." "No." Paul watched from afar, drinking coffee. "You know, I really should bring a camera to record this." Richard threw a paintbrush at him, and so the days passed, until finally the restaurant began to take shape. And when Layla walked into the finished space for the first time, her heart skipped a beat. It was real. She turned to Richard, moved. "This is amazing," he smiled. "And this is just the beginning. The next challenge? Hiring the team." Layla wanted people from the village, people who really understood the flavor of homemade food. Richard, on the other hand, insisted they needed a renowned chef. "Layla, we need someone with experience." "I have experience." "Someone with qualifications." She put her hands on her hips. "Oh, sure. Because a diploma teaches what my grandmother has been doing for 50 years. Richard sighed. "That's not what I meant." Layla crossed her arms. "Then let me build my own team." He raised an eyebrow. "You're that confident?" She smiled. "I'll prove I'm right." And so, the search for staff began. Layla went straight to her village. "Mr. Pedro, do you still cook that amazing beans?" "Mrs. Rosa, are you looking for a new job?" Remember when you wanted to be a baker? I have a proposal." In just a few days, she had her team ready. And when Richard saw everyone gathered, scratching their heads and trying to figure out how a billionaire and a village cook ended up as business partners, he couldn't help but smile. Layla tapped his shoulder. "I bet you've never worked with such good people." Richard smiled. "We'll see if they can handle it." The opening day came faster than Layla expected. The whole town seemed to know about the new restaurant. Journalists were outside, ready to cover the event. Customers were lining up. And Layla? She was freaking out. The sauce isn't right. The rice is burned. Who put sugar in the soy sauce? Richard walked into the kitchen and crossed his arms. What's going on? Layla ran her hand over her face. Chaos, that's what's happening. He laughed. Breathe, it's all under control. She looked at him, frustrated. How can you be so calm? Richard grabbed her shoulders. Because you're the best cook I know. Layla stopped. For a moment, she forgot about everything. Until, first order ready, and so the opening began. The customers loved the food. There were so many compliments that Layla could hardly believe it. Richard watched it all from a distance, satisfied. Paul walked over to him. You really took a big gamble on this. Richard smiled faintly, and it paid off. Paul looked at Layla, who was laughing while serving a table. And it's not just about the restaurant, is it? Richard turned his gaze. I don't know what you're talking about. Paul laughed. Of course you don't. Hours later, the restaurant closed. Layla collapsed into a chair, exhausted. Richard sat next to her. Did you survive? She sighed. Barely, he smiled. But you made it. She looked at him, and for the first time she realized her life would never be the same again. The restaurant was officially up and running, and to Layla's surprise, it was packed every day. The lines wrapped around the corner, the orders kept coming, and the customers left satisfied. But that also meant she no longer had a life. I'm dying. Layla flopped into a chair at the back of the kitchen after a long day. Richard, who was relaxed and drinking coffee, looked at her and laughed. You wanted this, remember? She lifted her face, hair messy, apron stained, and pure exhaustion on her face. I wanted a restaurant. I didn't want to become a zombie. Richard raised an eyebrow. The solution is simple. What? Hire more people. Layla blinked. What? Richard crossed his arms. I've already hired reinforcements. What do you mean? At that moment, the kitchen door opened and 3 new employees walked in. Layla was stunned. Who are you? Richard took another sip of his coffee. Our new team. She stood up. You hired new people without telling me? Richard smiled. Consider it a gift. She put her hands on her hips. Richard, I'm your business partner. You can't make decisions on your own. He shrugged. You were complaining about being tired. I solved the problem. Layla opened her mouth to argue, but he had a point. The new employees seemed capable, and she really needed help. Fine, you won this one. Richard smiled victoriously. As always, Layla rolled her eyes. Don't get used to it. With the team strengthened, the restaurant became even more efficient. But with that came a new problem. Fame. Before it was just a simple restaurant. Now, influencers were showing up. Famous people were posting about the dishes. And suddenly, Layla became a well-known figure. I didn't ask for this. She shouted when she saw a video of her going viral online. Richard once again seemed amused. What happened now? She pointed at her phone. This video has over 1 million views. Richard smiled. Congratulations. She stared at him, frustrated. It's not funny. I'm just a cook. He crossed his arms. And now you're a famous cook. Layla massaged her temples. I just wanted to cook, not become a celebrity. Richard walked over, took her phone and smiled. You know what? This is a good thing. How's that? He looked her in the eyes. It means people love what you do. Layla opened her mouth to argue, but stopped. Because deep down he was right. With the restaurant growing, things finally seemed to be falling into place. Until, one day, Miranda came back. She walked into the restaurant like she owned the place, wearing sunglasses and high heels. Good morning, darlings. Layla felt her stomach turn. Richard, who was at the register, frowned. What do you want, Miranda? She smiled. Just came to see how you guys are doing, after all this success. Layla crossed her arms. You never show up without a reason. Miranda sighed dramatically. Well, since you mentioned it, she pulled a golden invitation out of her purse. I'm organizing a special event, and I'd love for you to provide the catering. Layla blinked. What? Miranda smiled. I know we've had our differences, but business is business, right? Layla looked at Richard. He seemed suspicious. And what kind of event would this be? Miranda smiled with a hidden agenda. A charity dinner. A lot of important people will be there. It would be a great opportunity for you. Layla hesitated. Because, despite everything, it wasn't a bad idea. But she also felt that Miranda couldn't be trusted. She looked at Richard. What do you think? He sighed. I think it's risky to trust her. Miranda rolled her eyes. For God's sake, Richard, I'm offering you a golden opportunity. Layla hesitated a bit more, but in the end, okay, we'll do the catering. Miranda smiled triumphantly. Great. Richard crossed his arms. If you try anything, relax, darling. It's going to be a success. And with that, she left. Richard looked at Layla. Are you sure about this? She took a deep breath. I know she has hidden motives, but if this helps the restaurant grow, it's worth the risk. Richard sighed. You're braver than I thought. Layla smiled. And you haven't seen anything yet. In the following days, Layla and her team worked hard to prepare the buffet for Miranda's event. But something didn't feel right. On the day of the event, when they arrived to set up the food, Layla noticed a worrying detail. The waiters seemed nervous. The organizers were avoiding eye contact with her. And then, Richard got a phone call. He answered and immediately turned pale. What? Layla turned to him. What's going on? Richard looked at her, his eyes dark with anger. Miranda set us up. Layla felt her heart race. What do you mean? Richard took a deep breath. She told all the guests that the food from our restaurant was made by another chef. Layla's eyes widened. What? Basically, she's using our food, but claiming it was made by a competitor. Layla felt the anger rise. That snake! Richard looked at the staff. Everyone, stop serving, now. The waiters exchanged glances. Layla huffed. No, I'll handle this myself. Without thinking twice, she went up on stage, grabbed a microphone, and said, loud and clear, Good evening, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the dinner. I just want to clear something up. Miranda, who was at the back of the room, went pale. All this food, it was prepared by the restaurant Sabores de Vila. By me and my team. There was a general murmur. The guests looked at each other. Miranda tried to intervene. This is a mistake. But Layla didn't give her a chance. If anyone has doubts, feel free to come to the kitchen and I'll cook a dish right here. The guests erupted in applause. Miranda shook with rage. And Richard? He just smiled. This girl is amazing. That night, Layla and Richard left the event victorious. Miranda had tried to pull the rug out from under them, but the one who ended up as the joke was her. And for the first time, Layla realized she and Richard made a great team. The restaurant was getting even more famous after Miranda's fiasco at the event. The name Sabores de Vila was now everywhere, in the newspapers and on social media. Layla could no longer walk through the city without someone recognizing her. Hey, it's the chef from Sabores de Vila. A woman pointed at Layla in the market. You have to teach me that recipe, another customer said excitedly. Layla, holding a bag full of ingredients, just smiled nervously and hurried to leave. Richard, who was clearly enjoying himself, walked beside her with his hands in his pockets. You're getting famous. I didn't want to get famous, Layla grumbled, putting a tomato in the bag. But it's too late now, she sighed. This is your fault. Richard raised an eyebrow. Mine? Layla pointed at him. You dragged me into this world of rich people, and now I'm stuck here. He laughed. Did I drag you, or did you come willingly? She opened her mouth to argue, but closed it. Because, deep down, he was right. With the restaurant booming, Richard decided it was time to take things further. I want you to cook for a special dinner. Layla frowned. What do you mean by special? He smiled. It's going to be a business dinner, just for a few select people. Layla blinked. I'm going to cook for more rich people? Basically, she sighed. I don't know if my heart can take this anymore. Richard laughed. You'll be fine. The dinner was held at the top floor of a luxury hotel. Layla arrived, carrying ingredients, and immediately felt out of place. I definitely don't belong in this world, she muttered to herself. But once she stepped into the kitchen, everything changed. That's where she felt at home. That's where she was herself. While she cooked, Richard entertained the guests. The businessmen were impressed with the restaurant's growth. You found a diamond in the rough, Richard, one of them commented. That girl has talent, another added. Richard just smiled. I know. When the dishes started being served, the guests fell silent. The first to speak was an older man with gray hair. This is amazing. The others nodded. Layla, who was watching from a distance, felt warmth in her chest. She did it. However, not everything went as planned. When Layla returned to the kitchen, she saw something that shouldn't have been there. What are you doing? A waiter was holding a suspicious bottle and trying to pour something into the sauce. Layla ran over to him and stopped him right away. The man's eyes went wide, and he ran off. "Come back here," she shouted. But he was already gone. Layla looked at the bottle and shivered. Someone tried to sabotage the dinner. She ran to Richard. "We need to talk." He noticed the seriousness in her voice and nodded. "What happened?" She showed him the bottle. "Someone tried to put this in the sauce." Richard's eyes darkened. "Who?" Layla sighed. "I didn't see clearly, but he ran off as soon as he saw me." Richard took a deep breath. "I'll take care of it." And, for the first time, Layla saw something different in his eyes. He was genuinely furious. The dinner ended well, but Richard wasn't at ease. He wanted to find out who was behind the sabotage. Layla, on the other hand, was exhausted. "I just want to sleep for a week." Richard watched her for a moment and, without thinking, placed his hand over hers. "You did a great job today." She blushed. "Thank you." He smiled. "And now, I think we deserve a break." Layla laughed. "Finally, something sensible coming from you." The next day dawned with a strange energy in the air. Layla arrived early at the restaurant, still feeling the weight of what happened at the dinner the night before. She couldn't stop thinking about the fact that someone had tried to sabotage the food. What if she hadn't seen it in time? If that dinner had been ruined, the restaurant could have been discredited, and everything she and Richard worked for would have gone down the drain. This can't happen again. She walked into the kitchen and started organizing things. But before she could get to work, Richard appeared. "We need to talk." Layla, still messing with the ingredients, sighed. "If this is about last night's dinner, I'm already stressed enough." Richard crossed his arms. "I know. But there's something you need to know." Layla frowned. "What is it?" He pulled his phone from his pocket and turned the screen toward her. Layla felt her stomach drop. "What is this?" On the screen, there was a bombshell headline: "Successful restaurant owner involved in fraud scandal. Rumors indicate head chef is nothing but a fraud." Layla's face was in the photo. Her eyes widened. "But what? Who wrote this?" Richard took a deep breath. "I'm investigating, but it seems someone is trying to bring us down." Layla felt her head spin. "First they try to sabotage the food, and now this." Richard nodded. "I knew our growth would upset some competitors. But this is going too far." Layla clenched her fists. "This is ridiculous. I work harder in this restaurant than anyone. How can they say I'm a fraud?" Richard sighed. "I'll take care of it." "How?" He looked at her firmly. "By giving this person exactly what they want." Layla blinked. "Are you crazy?" "Trust me." Layla crossed her arms. "I trust you. But if this plan fails, you'll wash all the dishes in the restaurant for a month." Richard smiled. "Deal." In the following days, Richard did the unthinkable. He announced an open event where anyone could come to the restaurant and watch Layla cook live. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, nervous. Richard nodded. "If they want to question your skills, we'll show them they're wrong." Layla bit her lip. "This could go really wrong," Richard smiled. "Or it could go really right." On the day of the event, the restaurant was packed. Journalists, influencers, old and new customers. Everyone was there to see if Layla really knew how to cook, or if she was a fraud. Layla was nervous, but Richard placed a hand on her shoulder. "Just do what you always do." She took a deep breath and headed to the kitchen. What happened next was a masterpiece. Layla cooked with passion. Every dish came out flawless, and the customers were impressed by how easily she created new flavors. When the event ended, all the journalists were praising her skills. "She's really talented. The food is amazing. Definitely not a fraud." Richard smiled, satisfied. "I told you." Layla, exhausted, sat down in a chair and let out a sigh of relief. "That was the scariest thing I've ever done in my life." Richard laughed. "But it was worth it." Layla smiled. "It really was." After the demonstration event, Layla became a true sensation in town. Sabores de Vila was always packed, and her name was all over food blogs. But Layla knew that, in the business world, not everything was smooth sailing. "This is moving too fast, Richard." She and Richard were in the kitchen while the staff organized the orders. "And isn't that a good thing?" he asked, crossing his arms. Layla sighed, mixing the yakisoba sauce. "It is, but I feel like, I don't know, something bad is going to happen." Richard let out a laugh. "You're being paranoid." "Maybe. But ever since that guy tried to sabotage the dinner, I haven't been able to relax." Richard grew serious. If that's true, I'll find out who's behind this. Layla looked at him and sighed. Be careful not to get too involved. Richard gave her a half smile. Too late for that. That night, Richard went to one of his trusted contacts, Samuel Lopez, a private investigator. I need information on who's trying to destroy the restaurant. Samuel raised an eyebrow. And why are you so interested in this? Richard hesitated for a moment, then said, Because it's affecting me too. Samuel smiled. All right, I'll see what I can find out. 2 days later, the news came. Richard, I found out who's behind this. He answered the phone right away. Go ahead. Miranda. Richard scowled. Of course it's her. She couldn't accept the humiliation from the last event. And now she has a bigger plan. Richard felt his stomach churn. What is she planning? Samuel sighed. She's trying to buy the restaurant. Richard went silent for a moment. Then he murmured, She's lost her mind. Layla was cleaning the kitchen when Richard came in with a grim expression. We need to talk. She looked up at him. This is never good. Miranda is trying to buy the restaurant. Layla froze. What? She wants to take you down, and the best way to do that is by taking the restaurant away from you. Layla felt anger rise. She'll never succeed. Richard smiled. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. But deep down, he knew. Miranda wasn't going to give up that easily. The next morning, Layla received an outrageous proposal. A man in a suit appeared at the restaurant, handing her a contract. Miss Miranda wants to purchase this restaurant for a generous price. Layla took the paper and looked at the numbers. Is she kidding me? The man adjusted his glasses. No, miss. She believes this is a fair offer. Layla tore up the contract. Tell her I'm not for sale. The man stood still for a moment, then picked up the pieces of paper and left. Richard showed up shortly after. What did he want? Layla crossed her arms. Miranda tried to buy me out. Richard smiled. And what did you do? Layla lifted her chin. What do you think? He laughed. You surprise me more every day. But Miranda didn't give up. The next day, another bombshell news story broke. Sabores de Villa closed due to sanitary violations. Layla felt her heart drop. This can't be real. Richard knew it was a setup. She wants the restaurant to close. Layla refused to accept it. Then we'll fight. Richard smiled. Now you're speaking my language. The impact of the news hit like a bomb. Layla kept staring at the headline as if she expected the words to disappear from the screen. Sabores de Villa closed due to sanitary violations. This is ridiculous, she exclaimed, throwing her phone on the table. The restaurant has passed every inspection. Richard, standing next to her, looked over the official document sent by the inspectors. This is a setup. Miranda must have bribed someone. Layla felt her blood boil. She wants to destroy everything we've built. Richard crossed his arms, deep in thought. If she wants a war, then she'll get one. The next morning, Layla and Richard went straight to the health inspection office. Once there, they were greeted by a man in a gray suit with a monotone expression. Miss Layla, Mr. Stone, I'm sorry to inform you, but Sabores de Villa is closed until further notice. Layla leaned over the desk, furious. Based on what? The man flipped through a report. Evidence of expired products, lack of cleanliness in the kitchen, and a pest infestation were found. That's a lie. Layla slammed her hand on the table. Richard stepped in, staying calm. We want to see the evidence. The inspector sighed and pushed some photos toward them. Layla picked up the pictures and felt her stomach churn. Shelves full of expired products, pots with dirt residue. And, to make matters worse, a photo of a cockroach in the corner of the pantry. This can't be, Layla whispered. Richard took the photos and studied them one by one. These images are forged. The inspector raised his eyebrows. How can you be sure? Richard pointed to a detail in the pantry photo. This brand of seasoning hasn't been on the market for 2 years. The inspector hesitated. Layla stood up. This proves that someone planted this evidence to frame us. The man sighed. Still, the complaint has been filed. If you want to reverse the decision, you'll need a new inspection. Then do a new inspection now, Layla demanded. The inspector shook his head. Unfortunately, there's a bureaucratic process. The new inspection won't be able to happen for another 2 weeks. Layla's eyes widened. 2 weeks? Richard clenched his fists. This isn't a coincidence. Miranda is pulling the strings. Layla felt a lump in her throat. 2 weeks with the restaurant closed meant lost customers, financial loss, and worse, damage to the reputation that might be irreversible. But then an idea crossed her mind. She looked at Richard. If we can't open the restaurant, then let's bring the restaurant to the customers. The next morning, Layla and Richard were in the kitchen, preparing special takeout meals. If we can't have people come to us, we'll bring the food to them. Richard smiled. I like the way you think. They mobilized the entire restaurant team. In just a few hours, an improvised delivery system was set up. Let's post this on social media, Layla said, grabbing her phone. Richard grabbed his own phone and quickly typed something. Soon after, the post went live. Sabores de Vila may be closed, but our food still comes to you. Order now and enjoy homemade flavors wherever you are. The customers went wild. Do you think this will work? Layla asked anxiously. Richard smiled. Do you doubt me? Always. Then you're going to be surprised. And it worked. The orders kept coming in. In just a few hours, the kitchen was a complete mess, in the best possible way. Layla and the team ran back and forth, packing orders, organizing deliveries, pies, and making sure everything was perfect. We're overwhelmed, one of the employees exclaimed. Is that a problem or a solution? Layla responded, laughing. The truth was, despite the chaos, the plan was working, but Miranda wasn't going to let it go. That same night, a new headline appeared. Closed restaurant continues to operate illegally. Layla held her phone and sighed in anger. This woman has no limits. Richard grabbed her phone. Let me handle this. He called Samuel, the private investigator. Find out how Miranda is getting this information and let me know. Layla crossed her arms. She has someone infiltrated, Richard nodded, and we'll find out who it is. The next morning, one of the restaurant employees was caught red-handed taking secret photos. Layla stormed out of the kitchen, furious. What are you doing? The man swallowed hard, hiding his phone. Richard grabbed the device from his hand and saw the messages exchanged with Miranda. Gotcha. The employee tried to run, but Richard blocked the exit. Speak now, or we'll take this to the police. The man hesitated and then confessed everything. Miranda paid me to pass on information. She wanted to know what you were doing and sabotage your plans. Layla closed her eyes, trying to control her anger. Richard stared at the man. Grab your things and get out. The man ran off. Layla turned to Richard. This means Miranda already knows we're fighting back. Richard nodded. And now that we know the truth, it's time to strike back. Richard picked up the phone and made a call. Hey, I need a favor. On the other end, Samuel replied. What do you have in mind? Richard smiled. It's time to expose Miranda. The next day, a new article appeared online. Businesswoman involved in sabotage scheme against rival restaurant. The article contained all the proof of Miranda's manipulation. Messages, bank transactions, bribes. Miranda was caught in her own game. By the end of the afternoon, Layla and Richard were called to a meeting with the regulatory agency. With this new information, we'll reopen Sabores de Vila immediately. Layla felt her eyes fill with tears. Really? The inspector smiled. Really? Layla looked at Richard and, without thinking, hugged him tightly. He was surprised, but quickly hugged her back. We did it. That night, the restaurant reopened, with a line of customers outside. Layla looked at it and smiled. This is unbelievable. Richard put his hands in his pockets. No, this is the result of your work. She looked at him. He looked back at her. For a moment, everything was silent, until Layla let out a nervous laugh. If you think this means you get to eat for free, you're wrong. Richard laughed. You really are impossible, but deep down he knew he was completely smitten with her. The reopening of Sabores de Vila was a huge success. Since the early hours of the day, loyal and curious customers had formed a line that stretched down the sidewalk, eager to try the dishes that had become the talk of the town. Inside the kitchen, Layla ran everything with precision, but also with a smile on her face. For the first time in weeks, she felt in control. Let's have some fun with those who only read the comments? Type Pepsi in the comments. Only those who make it this far will understand. Now, let's get back to the story. Richard, on the other hand, watched everything from a distance, with an expression the staff couldn't figure out. He's acting strange, one of the cooks commented. Maybe he's in love with the boss, another joked, laughing. Or maybe he's just planning something. And indeed, he was. That night, Richard waited until all the customers had left and the staff finished their tasks before speaking with Layla. She was in the kitchen, cleaning a counter, when she felt someone approaching. I need to talk to you. She looked at Richard and raised an eyebrow. If this is about a new investment, can I decline now or later? He laughed, crossing his arms. This time it's not about business. Layla dried her hands on her apron and leaned against the counter. So, what is it? Richard took a deep breath. I want to take you out to dinner. She blinked a few times. Dinner? Like outside the restaurant? Yes. Layla tilted her head, suspicious. You've never invited me to dinner before. There's always a first time. She stared at him for a few seconds, trying to figure out what his game was. But something in the way he looked at her, the firmness in his voice, made it seem like this wasn't just a dinner. Layla took a deep breath and, against all expectations, replied. Okay. The restaurant they chose was one of the most luxurious in the city. Layla looked around, nervous. I feel like I'm being analyzed. Richard smiled. You are, but ignore it. She rolled her eyes. Easy for you to say. You were born in this environment. He tilted his head. And where would you prefer? Layla thought for a moment. I prefer places where I can be myself, where no one cares if my clothes have flour on them or if my hands smell like spices. Richard stayed silent for a few seconds. You know, I like that about you. Layla felt her face heat up. What? How you don't try to fit in. How you're not afraid to be who you are. She let out a nervous laugh. If that's a compliment, I'm taking note. They don't happen often. Richard laughed, picking up his wineglass. Then you should take more notes. Because I still have plenty more to give you. Layla felt her heart race. Why was he speaking like this? And more importantly, why did it make her feel things she shouldn't feel? The dinner went well. Too well. They talked as if nothing else mattered, as if the whole world was just that moment. But everything fell apart when they were leaving the restaurant. Across the street, a group of journalists was waiting for them. Cameras, flashes, microphones, and sharp questions. Mr. Stone, is Miss Layla your new girlfriend? Was this dinner a romantic date? Does this mean you're no longer interested in women from high society? Layla froze. Richard kept his composure, but his eyes turned cold. He put his arm around Layla's waist and quickly guided her to the car. Ignore them. But it was impossible to ignore. They were the center of attention in the city. And now, there was no turning back. The next morning, the internet exploded. CEO Richard Stone caught on romantic dinner with village girl. Layla nearly had a panic attack when she saw it. What? Messages from clients, friends, and even strangers flooded her phone. Is this true? Are you dating? When did this happen? She threw her phone on the table and ran her hands over her face. This is a nightmare. And then the phone rang. She answered without thinking. Layla! It was her grandmother. Grandma, I can explain. Are you seeing that man? No, I mean, yes, but it's not like they're saying. Then what is it like? Layla didn't know how to respond, and it was at that moment that someone knocked on the door. She turned and saw Richard. She felt like the day was about to get even worse. Richard crossed his arms. Did you see the news? Layla sighed. Of course I saw. My phone won't stop. My grandma is about to strangle me. He sighed. I'm sorry. Sorry, this is ruining my reputation. He raised an eyebrow. Your reputation or your heart? Layla froze. What? Because I think you're more scared of what you're feeling than what other people will think. She was speechless. And then he stepped closer. I like you, Layla, and I think you like me too. She felt the world spin. Richard, you don't have to answer now, but I want you to think about it. Layla didn't know what to think. All she knew was that her heart was a complete mess. That night, she couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned in bed, stared at the ceiling, tried to ignore the confusion inside her. But it didn't help. She was lost. And worse, maybe she was in love. Layla stayed up all night. No matter how hard she tried to push the thoughts away, Richard was on her mind. Every word he said, every look he gave her, every moment he treated her like she was special. She wanted to deny it, to believe it was all just a game, but it was real. And the worst part? She liked it. But admitting that out loud seemed too scary. The next morning, Layla decided to focus on work. She arrived at the restaurant earlier than usual, determined to occupy her mind with anything that didn't involve Richard Stone and his intense stares. But fate wasn't planning to leave her in peace. As soon as she walked into the kitchen, she saw a white envelope on the counter. Her name was handwritten on it. With her heart racing, she opened the envelope and found a note. Don't run away. We need to talk. I'll be waiting for you at the Grand Imperial Hotel at 7 p.m. Richard. Layla felt a flutter in her stomach. He wanted to talk? About what? And more importantly, should she go? The day passed too quickly, and before she knew it, it was almost night. Layla stared at herself in the mirror, unsure. Part of her wanted to completely ignore that note. The other part, however, already knew she was going no matter what. At 7 p.m. sharp, Layla arrived at the Grand Imperial Hotel. She entered the luxurious hall and looked around, feeling a little out of place. Then she saw Richard. He was standing by a reserved table, wearing a perfectly tailored suit with a serious yet kind look on his face. Layla took a deep breath and walked over to him. "You came. I still haven't decided if it was a mistake." Richard smiled faintly. "So sit down and find out." She rolled her eyes but sat down. The waiter served 2 glasses of wine, and Layla noticed that Richard seemed nervous. That was rare. "What's wrong?" she asked. He took a sip of his wine before speaking. "I want to make you an offer." Layla frowned. "If it's another job offer, I want you to be with me." The world stopped. Layla blinked, thinking she had heard wrong. "What?" Richard looked directly into her eyes. "I liked you, Layla, and I don't want to pretend I don't anymore." Her heart beat. "Richard, this doesn't make sense." "It makes all the sense in the world. You affect me in a way no one else ever has. I don't care about where you come from. I don't care about what people say. I only care about what we have." Layla felt her emotions taking over. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to accept. But the fear... "I'm not like the women you know. I don't know how to live in your world." Richard took her hand across the table. "I don't want you to change. I want you just the way you are." Layla felt her eyes burn. "You can't promise that." "Then give me a chance to prove it." She stayed silent, her heart racing. The world around her seemed distant, and then, without thinking, she cupped his face and kissed him. A kiss filled with everything that had been held back. And in that moment, everything made sense. The following days were a whirlwind. The news that Richard and Layla were together exploded in the media. There were speculations, gossip, people rooting against them. But none of that mattered. They were happy. And when Layla finally stopped to think, she realized that she had never been this happy in her entire life. Months later, Richard took her out for a special dinner. A dinner even more special than the others. And when the clock struck midnight, he knelt before her, holding a velvet box. "Marry me." Layla's heart nearly jumped out of her chest. "What?" Richard smiled. "I know you never planned for this. I know marriage was never part of your plans. But I also know I can't imagine my life without you." Tears began to fall from her eyes. "Richard, I love you, Layla, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you." She laughed and cried at the same time, and then she said the words that would change her life forever. Yes, the wedding was a beautiful and unexpected event. Unlike the lavish ceremonies of high society, Richard wanted something that had the essence of both of them. So the ceremony took place in the village where Layla grew up, in the garden of her grandmother's house. Simple flowers, lights hanging from the trees, tables filled with homemade food prepared by the community. Layla wore a delicate lace dress, nothing extravagant, but it made her look like a princess. Her hair was loose, with a few natural flowers woven in. Richard, on the other hand, wore a perfectly tailored suit, but without all the extra formality. He wanted this day to be perfect for Layla. The entire village showed up. Layla's grandmother cried like never before. The locals clapped and were moved. And when Richard and Layla said yes, there were cheers and applause all around. It was a simple wedding, but filled with love. When it was time for the celebration, Layla noticed something unexpected. Richard was completely at ease. He was talking to people, laughing, holding a plate full of yakisoba that she had made that morning. He didn't seem like the unreachable CEO everyone knew. He seemed just like a man in love with his wife. Layla smiled. She never imagined her life would take this turn. But looking at Richard there, in the village where she grew up, she realized he belonged there just as much as she did. Then, before they threw rice over the newlyweds, Richard took Layla's hand and whispered, "Now you're officially mine forever." She smiled and replied, joking, "I hope you can handle spending the rest of your life with a stubborn cook." He laughed and kissed her again. What'd you think of Richard and Layla's story? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate this story? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell to follow all our stories. And feel free to watch more emotional stories by clicking here on the final screen.